Okay, so let's go over these. Hopefully this didn't take you too long. Some people said 7 minutes, some people said 15. So I'm assuming for the kids who still haven't figured out Zoom, half an hour, and we're probably about right. So let's go through your letters here. You have A, is the anus, kind of a weird place to start in my opinion for labeling any animal, but whatever. A is the anus at the very end of the tail, the end of the digestive tract. And B, on the complete other end of the spectrum, is the mouth, very small circular hole where the earthworm takes in teeny, teeny, tiny forest floor debris. Up here with H, these two kind of circular orbs that run down to this, basically his soft, squishy spinal cord,
What's this one?
is a brain or a ganglia. And so here's the worm's brain, H. Then you go down to C, and C is very tricky because it really doesn't look like it's pointing to much. This has it labeled as nephridia. I can't see nephridia there. I certainly don't see any small kidney-like structures, but segments would be a good word. Those are segments. If you put nephridia, that's fine. If you put segments, that's fine as well. If you put setae, S-E-T-A-E, being the tiny bristles that it grips the earth with, I would take setae as well. So there's lots of options for C. Did anybody put something for C that I haven't mentioned that you would like to ask about? Okay, cool, moving on. D, the larger space behind the mouth, is the pharynx. And then we'll probably just stay in this tube because it's easier to do that. And so let's just stay in this tube. So the mouth goes in the pharynx and through this long skinny tube underneath the hearts to the esophagus, which would be G. You could really put that arrow just about anywhere in here and count that as esophagus. So that's G, the esophagus. And if we keep going down the tube, we get to a soft, squishy bag that stores the food for later, much like our stomach does, called the crop. And then a much stronger, muscly bag called the gizzard. And that's after that, it's just intestine, which is L, all the way to the anus. And essentially the intestine is lined with blood vessels that will pull the nutrition from that food and get that nutrition everywhere, which is the point of a circulatory system. You want to get the energy from your food to your muscles and to your brain and to your other organs, and all of these things take energy, right? So that was kind of our time in the digestive tract. So let's get back to where we were, which was kind of the head. So up here for I, you have these paired organs. You could put heart if you like. You could put aortic arches if you like, but these are basically the pairs of hearts that line that worm. And so I don't care so much that you know the number. There's pairs, so 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 hearts of these paired aortic arches that are just contractile vessels. And so that's kind of how that works. Those are your aortic arches. Now F is a tricky one. Pardon me. F and J. It's tricky, but it's also ingenious in my opinion. So the aortic arches essentially pump the blood up this one single large artery called your dorsal blood vessel. Dorsal means back, and so the blood is going to run down this worm and through the capillaries until it gets to a ventral blood vessel, which is its belly side, and then it runs belly side back up to the heart where it pumps again. And I think that's ingenious because pardon me, I could be wrong, but it seems like it's probably at least partially gravity fed, which I think is really smart. Like if you pump the blood up the top, then it returns on the bottom. That's kind of a cool design, right? So that's a dorsal and a ventral blood vessel. I think that's quite handy. And that's really all we're gonna do for circulatory system. There are smaller vessels that you can't see called capillaries. Those are everywhere in this worm. Everywhere are capillaries. And capillaries are also everywhere in you, by the way, and they are where the actual oxygen and CO2 and food exchange occur, is on a capillary. And to give you a visual, it's a blood vessel as thin as a cotton candy strand, if that helps you. If you get cotton candy at the fair and it's spun so thin that if you touch it, it crushes, that's the size of a capillary in your body, a worm's body, whale's body, whatever, capillaries are capillaries are capillaries. Then all that really leaves is M, which is the clitellum. The clitellum is really just this smooth section on the worm that lets you tell front from back. And we'll see some other better images of a clitellum. So any questions on that before we say goodbye to the worm diagram? Going once, going twice? Okie dokie then. Let's get rid of this thing. So where I want to go is this fellow. Sorry, I have to move your guys' faces. I can see you, which is cool, but I also can't see my PowerPoint, which is less cool. So what we have to do is figure out my life. There we go. 30 seconds later, life's figured out. All right, so here you have the diagram we left off with. We spent a lot of time going over all the business of a worm. Then yesterday you had all the business of a worm. And so here we sit ready to basically, we've talked about all these systems a little bit. So now we're just going to knock them out rather quickly. And so if it seems like I'm going too quickly or I need to slow down, just raise your hand and let me know, because we've already talked about them individually. We can, or rather together, we're going to talk about them individually. So first things first, setae is a word I would like you to know. Setae are the bristles on an earthworm's, if you would like to call it an abdomen, I guess you could. Not really an abdomen, but ventral side, belly side, right? They're crawling belly on the ground, back up above, and they basically push their little heads up, stab the setae into the ground, and drag their butts to catch up, kind of inchworm style. You've seen worms crawl in the parking lot after a rainstorm, right? They kind of lift their little head up and look side to side, which is incorrect because they have no eyes. So I shouldn't say look. And then they kind of find a direction they want to go and stick their little head down in the parking lot and drag their butt to catch up until they dehydrate and become crispy little worm nougats on the sidewalk. Poor little fellows. If only they had eyes, they could make it back, I think. But whatever. They can be retracted into the worm's body. So for the cat lovers in the class, you might know that cats have claws that can be extended out or retracted into the pad of the cat's hand. The setae on the worm work in a very similar manner, which I think is kind of cool. There are two types of muscles on the worm. I don't know if it's necessarily worth you putting in your memory for the rest of your life, but all a muscle can do is contract or relax. When a muscle contracts, it becomes shorter. I don't know if I can put a muscle in front of my computer screen. I think I can. If a muscle contracts, it becomes shorter, okay? Shorter muscle moves a thing. Or it can relax and become longer, okay? And so that's what all muscles can do. So earthworms have muscles that run the length of their body. And if you contract the muscles on the length of the worm's body, the worm would become short and kind of thicker, right? Then they have circular muscles that run down the tube. And if you were to contract those muscles, the worm would get skinnier and longer and kind of stretch out. And so with those two working back and forth, the worm can stretch out and become long and skinny, stick his setae into the soil, and then contract the muscles that run down his back and pull himself up to his head. And they can move reasonably quickly, especially if they have part of their tail still in the hole and they're just kind of sticking their little head up to eat food, and something, some person is stomping on the ground or a robin is landing on the ground. They can feel those vibrations and suck into the ground and hide, which is kind of an interesting thing. You can also do the opposite thing, not to get us too far off topic, but I think it's worth noting because it is hilarious. There's a machine, maybe that's too strong of a word. There's a thing called a worm getter. And the worm getter, I kid you not, is a wooden stick with like little grooves cut in the side. It's hilarious. And you take it out in the early wet mornings and you pound it into the ground, and then you grab a separate stick and rub up and down the worm getter, and it makes the earth vibrate underneath of you. And for some unknown reason, worms come crawling out of the ground so fast and just lay there on the surface. And then you just pick them up with your worm getter, with your hands actually. And the most popular opinion on the matter is that when the earth vibrates all around the worm, they think there is a mole digging for them or a badger digging for them. So wherever their tunnel ends up, they are going to get out of that tunnel as quickly as they can. Oftentimes that's at the surface, and the worms just kind of fly up at your feet, and then you pick them all up and proceed to hillbilly heaven to catch all the bluegill you darn well please. Just kidding, not actually heaven, like a great fishing spot, okay? So, and I'm not making fun of hillbillies. Remember, I caught worms when I was a kid and sold them. So, you know. Anyways, I have to be careful making jokes like that. This goes on YouTube. I just, oh, all right, moving on. Here we go. If you cut a worm in half, here's all the muscle layers you would see. Again, I'm not super worried about your memorizing, like this is circular and this is longitudinal, but since this is under a microscope, it is pretty cool to note how ridiculously small a nephridium is, because this little pink speck under a microscope, that's a nephridium. It's tiny, kind of almost a kidney, but not quite a kidney structure, which is quite interesting. Longitudinal muscles are running down the worm. Circular muscles are running around the worm, like so. And kind of a cool picture. Nothing you need to make a flashcard out of or memorize, but you know, it's interesting, I think. We've already talked about how they move. Here's a worm crawling. Oh, they're so gross. Look at that thing. No eyes. Poor little baby. Whatever. Extend the front of their body, which is their head. Stick the setae in the soil. Draw their butt to catch up. If the soil is too hard, earthworms can eat their way through the soil, which is a very, very cool feature that they have. They make soil very porous. The pores allow water and air to access plants more readily, and so earthworms are doing quite an important job there. So that's a cool thing. Nothing too shocking, I don't suppose. Okay, so there's always a danger in biology for missing the forest for the tree, which is this idea that you like memorize little words like mesoglea so you can do well on a test, and you kind of forget like why are we learning this, you know? And so it's always good to kind of take a step back and say why are we learning this? Why would God create dirt eating slimy brown things? That doesn't make any sense. Why are they even important? Why are we spending this time? And the answer is, of course, they are very important. These earthworms that dig these burrows, their burrows dig down into deeper soil layers. And when they dig down, they carry down plant residues. So bear in mind, they go up to the surface. They eat up the little dead leaf and pine needle chunks. Then they carry them down their tunnels and poop them out into deeper surfaces. Deeper surfaces? No, that's not a thing. Into deeper layers of the soil. And so if you've ever had a garden, you might remember mom or dad or grandma or grandpa take out this big rototiller thing and they sprinkle fertilizer junk on their garden, and they fire up the gas rototiller and chop, 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 chop. And they chop the dirt and circulate this nutrition into deeper layers of their soil so that as their carrots and potatoes grow down, they can have a bigger garden. Earthworms do that all on their own, which is really cool. That's the whole point, right? They're doing that for us with no gasoline and no sweating in the sun. So that's a pretty cool deal. They also make a poopy called a cast, and the cast is the digested material excreted back into the soil. Not the most exciting thing you've ever heard of, but it is, because they have more accessible nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and calcium, followed by a ton of beneficial bacteria. Sorry, did I miss a question? Mariah says she doesn't like potatoes. That's okay, Mariah. There are many other veggies you could try to eat. Potatoes aren't, you know, anything too wonderfully wonderful, but sorry, Mariah. We'll grow something else. How about lettuces? Do you like lettuces? She's thinking. She nodded her head yes. Fantastic. Okay. Well, then we'll focus on the lettuces, which still benefit from the worms. During its passage through the worm's digestive system, it picks up a bunch of bacteria. The fresh cast is a site of intense microbial activity. Those microbes are also nutrient cycling and continue to break down that organic material in the soil. And so earthworms are making our soil more porous, which holds more water and holds more air, makes the soil a little easier to work with. And the coolest thing is plant roots aren't dumb. They follow the path of least resistance. And oftentimes plant roots will follow earthworm tunnels. So your plants can put down roots more quickly through earthworm tunnels than they would through your hard, clotted up, rototilled garden. So for the garden nerds in the house, check out the Ruth Stout gardening method. She's a lazy old lady who came up with the coolest idea ever. But for the non-gardening nerds, you don't have to look that up. And I don't mean to be disrespectful saying she's old. She was just up there in years when she came up with the method, and it works great. I've tried it in my garden. So what do? They allow more air into the soil. They allow water to infiltrate the soil as opposed to evaporating immediately when the sun comes out after the rainstorm. And they allow your soil to drain more quickly if you get too much rain and the fields are flooded. So lots of earthworms, happy soil, happy plants, happy people, because we're eating something more nutritionally rich than Cheetos. Although Cheetos are delicious. Don't sue me, Cheeto Company. I know this is on YouTube. I'm sorry. It only gets like 3 views. Don't sue me. Okay, so earthworm nutrition. You guys already know what earthworms eat because you're very, very smart. They eat vegetation, dead leaves, dead grass, dead pine needles, even little dead animals, if you have those in your garden or yard, which could totally happen. Decaying animal material, little critters die in the woods, I hear, and they certainly don't just leave their little critter bodies in the woods forever. They're turned into dirt and grass, like Mufasa told us when we were kids. And they eat soil that contains that matter. The soil goes in through their mouth, no duh. Then it goes to their pharynx, just like yours, down an esophagus, just like yours, into a crop, not like yours. You have no crop. If you do, I'm very concerned. The crop is stored temporarily, and then it goes to a gizzard, the muscly bag that crushes the food up. To my knowledge, worms do not eat tiny pebbles like birds to aid in this crushing, but I don't know. I guess we'll have to cut one open and investigate. I do have an idea for a dissection, though. I think I might actually do a dissection and just record it with my phone and do that as a live Zoom meeting. We'll see. And I want to make sure Taya doesn't bring her helper because I don't want to scare her with a worm. It'd be weird. Anyways, oh, sorry. Am I clicking too quickly? I see some people are still writing, and I apologize for that. Give me a thumbs up if you're ready to go to the next slide. Okay, thumbs up, 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 up. All right, I got about half the class, so I'm going to take that as yes, Mariah. Mitch, write quickly. Mariah's ready, and she's, that's funny. That's funny. Okay, I like it. It's a family affair now, this learning about earthworms. Digestion, basically they're going to hit their food with digestive enzymes, just like you and I would. The enzymes are just proteins, essentially, that break large particles into smaller chemical particles, because our goal is to get them into a bloodstream, which is a pretty small area. The stuff that gets into their bloodstream is pumped all throughout their body. Glucose, just like you need. That glucose gets to their muscles, gets to their brain, helps them to grow. It's really not that different from larger animals. Undigested materials expelled out through the anus, just like in larger animals. We have a special name for their poop. I have no idea why. I'm not sure I want to know. But the cast is the solid waste of worms. If you've seen my worm bin at school, they have a solid brown mass they make called black gold. That is worm poop. Some people think it's great for plants, but who knows? And then they have a liquid waste, which is the worm pee, which no one wants to say worm pee, so they say compost tea. Ugh, doesn't sound a whole lot better in my opinion. And that can also be put on plants, or so I hear. But I'm certainly not going to drive all the way out to the school to get my worm pee. That's weird. Digested material goes into the bloodstream, just like in you and I, circulated throughout the body, just like you and I. Here's their bloodstream. You have a dorsal blood vessel, a ventral blood vessel, aortic arches or hearts if you like, and then those little capillaries run everywhere throughout the worm's entire body. And so it's pretty simple. Why it says he'll get my worm pee for you. Be careful what you say, Wyatt. The valve, I believe, is plugged, which means you might be scooping it out with a cup. And you know, I'm not gonna say I haven't done it, but it's a weird job. You know, oh, heck yeah, wonderful. Well, there you go. Wyatt's not scared of a little worm pee. So I guess we'll put that on the garden and see how she goes. What a day. What a day. Any questions about digestive systems or circulatory systems at this point? No? Cortland has a helper as well. Everybody has younger sisters. Okay, so here's a quick picture. You might see something like this on your test. Mouth at the top leads to pharynx, pharynx to esophagus here, esophagus to crop, crop to gizzard, gizzard to intestine. Intestine continues all the way down, excuse me, to the anus. Other systems that you should know, worms have what's called a closed circulatory system. I'm not really a bug guy, so take this with a grain of salt. But essentially, you have open and closed circulatory systems. A bug, an insect, right, has an open circulatory system. You and I have a closed circulatory system. An open circulatory system is basically like their heart is in their like bottom. It bottom like ventral and inferior, not dorsal, like as in their butt. Sorry, the bottom of their chest, right? They have a clearish, greenish fluid called endolymph instead of blood. All right. So if you ever like read those like weird animal books and it's like, this has green blood, that's probably what it's talking about. The heart pumps the endolymph. The endolymph goes up the bug's back, is exposed to oxygen near the bug's skin, and then kind of just trickles down over its organs like a little clear waterfall thing and gets some oxygen that way. And then it collects in the abdomen and the heart pumps again. And then the blood goes up to the back again and it's open. Like it literally just pumps blood into an open space and hopes for the best. That's crazy, but it works, so I can't insult them. I mean, good for them. It works great. You and I have a closed circulatory system. Closed circulatory system is a whole different animal. Your blood does not just willy-nilly get sprayed into empty cavities. Your heart pumps blood to arteries. Arteries lead to smaller arteries called arterioles, which lead to capillaries, which exchange oxygen and CO2 in your lungs or muscles or brain or wherever. And then they lead back to larger arteries, check that. Larger vessels called the venules, which lead to larger vessels called veins, which lead back to your heart to recycle this entire thing back to your lungs and go, go, go. But you have tubes. The blood is in those tubes the entire time. Closed circulatory system. Open circulatory system, push the blood up and see how she goes. It's just a big empty wasp body. Does that kind of make sense? I'm getting some head nods. Cool. I'm glad because it doesn't make sense to me. All right. Anyways, oh, what other things? Okay, that's Tanner making a message. Thanks, Tanner. Okay, so at any rate, what we have here is okay. Blood remains in the vessel all the time. Got it. There's two major vessels. The dorsal blood vessel. Already talked about that. It's on his back, like a dorsal fin on a whale, dolphin, whatever. Ventral blood vessel carries blood down his abdominal end or the bottom end of the worm. So that's, again, something we've already talked about. So I don't want to spend too much time there. Here's a really, really good diagram of this. I like this because it's always a question of like, don't worms have 6 hearts? And how many hearts do worms have? And can I cut them into 6 pieces? And this one I think is kind of funny. Aortic arches are 5 pairs of thick, muscled blood vessels that connect the ventral and the dorsal. And then there's a main heart that runs down the middle. So if we wanted to be technical about it, you've got 1 down the middle, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 5 pairs of aortic arches tapered in the middle that both contract. 1 main one down the middle would technically kind of make 11 hearts on a worm. Now, can we chop them into 11 pieces and make 11 worms? No, certainly not. They're all in like segments 3 to 8. So once you cut his belly off, it would be no better off than a human, right? You'd cut their belly off and then tons of blood would come out of their abdominal aorta and that'd be the end of that. Well, it's the same thing. He has these gigantic blood vessels. Like if you cut him right here, holy moly, all that blood is going to spill out. So as much as I wish I could say I can cut worms into 6 pieces and regenerate so many worms, I don't think we can do that. Unless it's a flatworm. Like a, you know, maybe we can make it work with that guy, but not these guys, not these round worms. So on that note, Tanner, my timekeeper, as always, is reminding me that it is 2:30, which he's right on there. So thank you, Tanner. Do you guys have any questions at all about any of the systems that we've covered or anything coming up? Okay, I've got head nods of no. So I guess on that note, you guys have an awesome day. It's